Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Confessions of a Gen Activist, True Crime Stories. My name is Kelly Green, and I am that Gen Activist. If this is your first time joining the podcast, I welcome you, and I want to explain that these are personal stories of my own activism, interlaced with current events that was happening at the time and context of what was going on in the world, etc. Before I get into episode 5, which will wrap up the year 2000 in The Hague with the passport burning and carry on into the Free Trade of the Americas Agreement gathering in Quebec City in the spring of 2001. Wow, what a time that was. Before I get to that, I wanted to bring up World Car Free Day, which is right around this time near the end of September, third, fourth week of September. And this is an action that's been quite interesting over the years, but back in 2000, I believe, or 1999 or 2000, there was a Take Back the Streets. So I guess it's not the same as World Car Free Day, but similar. So we're taking back the streets in Edmonton, which involved sort of rolling up on this very busy street, 104th Street South, bound at White Avenue. So one block between 82nd and 83rd Avenue on 104th Street, where a bunch of activists just rolled up. They had a sound stage set up on a flatbed truck, some barricades, people with a lot of sod rolls that were rolled out. There was tables, and it was a very festive atmosphere. There was people in costumes, so there was music and dancing and frivolity and bicycles. And we had that street closed off, and it was a big party. So it was a surprise to the city, it was a surprise to the police, and it was a surprise to anybody in the neighborhood except those activists that were planning that event on that day. Now, as a media activist myself, I would always be photographing a number of different events and different protests and rallies and interesting things that I see in my day-to-day life. And one of the ways that I was able to earn a little bit of income for my activism and for my photography was to turn these 4x6 printed photographs into a 5x7 postcard. So I would get cardstock. Oftentimes I would just cut squares out of cereal boxes or whatever kind of cheap cardstock I could find, generally trying to go with recycled or reused cardstock. And I would glue my picture on there, sign it, give it a little title, and I would sell them. I'd sell them on the street to anybody that was interested. I had some on consignment in Earth's General Store when they were they were upstairs over on 108th Street and White Avenue. Earth's General Store, as you may know, they've been closing down this week. And you also may know, Max, that they've been a big part of supporting activism in Edmonton for many, many years, 33 years now. And we're sad to see them depart the scene. Although there is a fundraiser right now to try and save the small fledgling business, we're yet to see whether that is a successful effort. At any rate, this is a cool story. So I photograph this Take Back the Streets action. I actually climb up on top of the building where that restaurant, it's called Meat. So I'm up on top of that building, and I'm taking some photographs of the proceedings down below. I make some postcards. I have some postcards into Earth's General Store. Now fast forward a year or so into Toronto, halfway across the country, Edmonton to Toronto, and I meet somebody. I'm over at their place, and I see that they have this postcard that I had taken the picture of and put in to sell on consignment at Earth's General Store. So I said, well, that's really cool. I'm curious where you got that postcard. This person says, well, I got that postcard at Earth's General Store. I'm nodding knowingly. So I'm waiting to tell my cool part of the story. They say, but the cool part is that I'm in that picture. I said, no way. That's too cool. I said, you know what's even more cool? I took that picture. So that was kind of interesting. A nice little aside from the activism. So this was, besides making photographs and trying to sell my printed photographs to other activists and interested people in the community, I was also starting to do the same with videos. So I did that with the Maud Barlow video from the teach-in at Queen Alexandra Hall, close to Scona High School. And I would revisit that idea later on in Toronto in 2001, shortly before I launched the organization called Boiling Frog. But we'll get to that. We'll get up to 2004, 2005, where I have my life threatened by an ex-cop. We're going to get to a lot of interesting, crazy stories, and we're going to get to the passport burning very, very quickly. But first, I need to back up again just a little bit. I want to show off my t-shirt today. It's from GoF Yourself Press. It was a hand-me-down from my good friend Gord Adam, who sadly passed a few years back. But I wanted to show you this t-shirt. I'm showing you this t-shirt because this was a gift from my brother Kevin. He gave this to me. Wow. I've had this shirt for well over 30 years. It was one of my favorite shirts for the longest time until I got a little bit too thick for it. On the back of this shirt, I don't know if you can read it that well, but this... So I think my brother got this for me because I was very new in the environmental issues and into activism, and I was very concerned and telling everybody how concerned I was about the environment and the planet and how urgent of a situation that it is. So my brother, somehow he come across this t-shirt and he thought it'd be perfect for me. End of the World Tour, major dates. So we've got Love Canal, New York. This was a river or an area that was heavily poisoned, a lot of cancers, I think. 3 Mile Island, also New York, I believe. So this is a nuclear reactor that had a meltdown and caused a lot of radioactive contamination of that. So this is 1979. As an aside, lately, September 2024, it's just been reported that 3 Mile Island is set to be rebooted, brought back into producing power in order to help feed Google, I think, in their artificial intelligence operations. So this isn't good. We've got Bhopal, India in 1984. This was a giant chemical plant explosion, Union Carbide, I believe. Giant chemical plant explosion killed many, many, many thousands of people on that day, and no doubt left a lot of disease and death in its wake to this day. We've got Chernobyl in 1986, another nuclear power plant meltdown. Prince William Sound, Alaska. I'm going to leave that one vague. If you think you know what it is, let me know. Prince William Sound, 1989. Those who know, know. Amazon rainforest. It was in trouble back then, and it's in trouble today. A lot of fires in the Amazon, a lot of deforestation. It's one of the lungs of our planet, and we need to save it dearly. The ozone layer was a big deal back then in Antarctica, predominant hole, but also over the northern hemisphere, the ozone layer, predominantly a problem. Also still a problem. The ozone hole has not entirely healed. In fact, it could take many, many decades yet for it to do so, if it does so at all. And the last on this end of the world tour, going up to 1991, is Persian Gulf. And this is a result of the Gulf War conducted by the Americans against the Iraqis. And specifically, the huge oil field fires that were in the wake of that attack. It's an unbelievable environmental disaster. Anyways, I wanted to bring those t-shirts up. I do love a good t-shirt, and that one in particular, like I said, I've been thinking about my brother. It's his birthday tomorrow. Sadly, he's no longer with us. He died from a toxic drug overdose, poison drugs. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about Uncle Kevin, my brother. He passed away in the first year of the pandemic from a poison drug supply. That shirt he'd given me. And tomorrow I'm meeting with his daughter Sapphire and mutual friend Sarah. So that will be nice, little reminiscing of my brother. But I guess back to the story. We're in The Hague the last time I spoke on episode 4. We're at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP6, in 2000 at The Hague. Traveled there with Tooker Gomberg shortly after his run for mayor of Toronto in November of 2000. So we're at the conference center. Tooker had his credentials removed from him on the Wednesday. We've been there for 2 days sleeping inside. We found another office that we could squat in. the whole time, so I'm shooting video the whole time. Tooker's conducting interviews. We're connecting with activists, other journalists. Tooker had connected with a gentleman from Brazil, a Brazil media company, Brazil TV, and they were pioneering some live internet broadcasting, which was quite exciting. And Tooker being a techie, he was quite excited about that, and was convinced that we're just on the verge of being able to go live with our activist video. And this Brazilian was showing us how it was done. So we're making the contacts. I would be in and out of the conference covering different events that were happening throughout the city as well. As I had mentioned before, it wasn't ending well. We were trying to come to an agreement on how to reach the goals of the Kyoto Protocol from 1997. This is now a few years later. And it looked like the conference was falling apart. The large organizations, your World Wildlife Funds, your Greenpeace, they were planning something. I think they were planning a large march through the conference center. There had been some large actions in the center earlier in the week, and of course outside throughout the city. But Tooker really wanted to plan something. He wanted to do something big, really get people's attention. So he had this idea that he was going to find a sink and fill it up with coal, like charcoal briquettes. We're going to get a globe of the earth and put it on the coal, light the coal on fire. It'll be very symbolic of the coal and the sinks and the planet on fire. And we would have a press event around that. So because Tooker didn't have proper credentials, I was sent out into the city to pick up this globe. And I'm running around all these different stores, different department stores, trying to find one. And I finally found a globe, you know, the kind that sits on an axis and you put it on your desk and you spin it around and look at all the countries. It was lovely. And I pick up a liter of camp fuel because we needed something to to light the fire, or accelerate the fire, I suppose. So I make it back into the conference center. We've got the globe, I got the fire starter. Tooker unwraps the box. We pull out the globe, and he discovers it's a plastic globe. We can't burn a plastic globe. It would just be awful and toxic and disgusting. We thought it'd be one of those old-fashioned cardboard globes that we had when we were kids. But no, it was a plastic globe, and we had to regroup and rethink this. So Tooker scurried out the conference center. Just went outside for some fresh air, had some thought about that. Came back in a couple minutes later. Now it's late in the afternoon on a Friday. The conference it's coming to an unglorious end. Tooker comes up to me and he says, I have an idea. I'm going to burn my passport. And it'd be really cool if someone else was there to burn their passport with me too. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm down with that. Sounds like fun. Not a lot of thought went into it. He'd already had a cart, a metal cart that he'd sourced out. We didn't find the sink, we didn't get the charcoal, but we had a metal cart, we had our globe as a prop, we had our liter of camp fuel. I don't know why we would still have that with us. It seems, in retrospect, a little bit dangerous. And we rolled into the media center. Now, you might remember from episode 4, I explained how the media center was in this big, giant hall. There was literally like 1,000 media from all over the world. And we're at this point in the conference where it's a lull. It's right around supper time. We're kind of waiting for the evening session to get into place. So there was a lot of standing around, a lot of media just sort of standing around waiting for something to happen. So we did a circle through this media and kind of, you know, psst, psst, hey, come over here in 5 minutes, you know, something big is going to happen. Hey, psst, psst, tell your friend, you know, meet us over there in 5 minutes, something big is going to happen. So we kind of spread the word a little bit, and Tooker rolled his card up to the Brazilian television guy. I wish I knew his name or his company. You see him in our films, which I linked on episode 4. I'll probably link here again. Tooker rolls up, and the Brazilian is interviewing. He's right in the middle of a live interview on the internet, which again, this is a new thing. Like, it hadn't really been existing before then. So he's right in the middle of a live interview, the guy from the New York Times, and Tooker just rolls right between them and says, excuse me, I need to occupy this space. And the New York Times guy is kind of like, wow, that's very strange, and he just beats it out of there. And the Brazilian had already been friends with Tooker, so he was also shocked. But birds of a feather. He knew Tooker was up to something big, so he's like, okay, well, let's see what you have going on. And Tooker busts out his passport. He's got a great speech. He lights it on fire. The media is like building and building and building. Like we're really, like, we're just getting surrounded. And you'll see it in the film if you watch it. We're just surrounded, and I'm getting crushed in this scrum of other photographers and videographers and people with microphones, and I'm sort of getting pushed, and I'm getting squeezed at the back of the thing, and I'm holding up my camera, and I'm thinking, well, this is good. This is a great action. This is fantastic. And I kind of maybe forgot that I had agreed I'm going to participate, and I was also thinking maybe I don't have to participate, but because Tooker had tipped people off, there was a reporter that said, is there someone else that's doing this action with you as well? And he says, well, as a matter of fact, Kelly Reinhardt, my former last name, step up, please, step up. So I'm like, dang it, I've been called out. So I've still got the camera rolling. I walk around to the other side where all the action is happening. I pass the camera off to Tooker, but I neglected to tell him it was already running. So unfortunately, when he went to hit record, he was actually turning the camera off, and he didn't realize that, and we'd missed a large portion of my cringy speech where I announced myself and why I'm burning my passport and lighting it on fire, etc. The action picks up a little bit where I've got the small fire smoldering and smoking and burning in a pile on this metal table in front of me, this metal cart, and there's some really great scenes of the crowd and the reactions of different media folks and how they're taking it. Some speeches by Tooker and myself, and then the security shows up. We find out it was the same head of security, the same security guy that had snatched Tooker's credentials, his name tag and his lanyard and everything, some couple of days previous. So he was already known to this security officer, and he comes over with a couple of his lackeys, says, excuse me, you have to come with us. And Tooker says, no, I'm not coming with you guys, and I didn't do anything wrong. And there's a little bit of a conversation. You'll see it on the video. And then Tooker he's got this little horn that he used to announce the beginning of the action. It was a little squeezy, curly bike horn, where he pulled off the rubber squeezy knob and blew into it like a trumpet, super loud, and then he scurried off. So he runs off. I'm standing there with the camera. The security guards kind of go after him, and it's like a like a Benny Hill or a Keystone Cops. You can almost see the sped up silent footage and the strange piano music. It was kind of funny. Tooker makes a round through the place, kind of evades them somehow, loses them, comes back to the camera and does his thing. Security comes back. He's got the two guys, and they're looking around all confused, and they're not grabbing him, thankfully. So we're able to stay. Security gives up. They kind of run off. He doesn't know what to do. Maybe he's trying to recruit some of the local Dutch police, but he's like UN security. We're on like UN property, UN designated property at this time. So he doesn't know what to do, and we don't want to leave now this conference center, because as soon as we go out of the hall, we're going to be vulnerable and alone, away from the cameras and the protection of the media. These guys are for sure going to grab us. So we wanted to stay in front of that live internet video feed, as well as all the other media and my own camera that's running most of the time through this whole event. The Brazilian contingent, there was a gentleman and 4 or 5 women that were working with him. They basically were our protection for that night, and a couple of other sympathetic media members. And we stuck with them for several hours until it was time for them to leave. And then they escorted us. They're all tall. They're like my height, and Tooker's small, and they're my height or taller. And they surrounded us as we walked through the conference center back to our corner, little squatted office. We grabbed all our stuff, and then they surrounded us and gave us a little shield, and we walked, and we got out of the conference center that Friday night, and it was the first time Tooker had been away from the conference center in days. But again, we weren't that planned out. Didn't have a place to stay. Tooker got on the phone. We found a Greenpeace campaigner who was sympathetic to our cause, who had a room which he wasn't using. He gave us his nice room, and for the first time in days, we got to sleep in a bed. We had a nice hot shower in the same suite as where we're sleeping. It was quite nice. Washed our socks in the sink, and things were lovely. Now, I thought this was the end of it. What are we going to do now? Figure out a way to go home, wrap up the story somehow. But no, The next morning, Tooker has the idea that we now have to get back into the conference center. It was supposed to end the night previous. There was no agreement reached. They pushed it and extended it one more day. So Tooker deemed it very appropriate that we get back in there for these closing sessions to find out what's going on and try and bring some attention to this calamity that's unfolding. So we make it up to the gates. Tooker's got no proper credentials, and we make it past the first gate. We make it past the second gate. It's a little bit iffy. And then there's the security. There's an X-ray scanner. I've got the camera rolling the whole time. I put the camera on the X-ray scanner. It's going through the scanner. Tooker's getting pat down. And who should happen to be at the front door that morning but the head of security? He's about 30 feet away. And the look on his face when he looks over and sees Tooker, oh my God, he's like, him, get him. Get that guy. And he signals to a couple of his goons, and they run over and they grab Tooker, these giant UN guards. And they grab Tooker and they start, they lift him up and they start dragging him out the front door. And Tooker's got his passport in his hand and he's waving and he's like, I'm a Canadian citizen. I'm a journalist. I have a right to be here. And they toss him outside and I follow him back outside. And there was a little bit of a awkward skirmish where they try and separate us and, are they going to do anything? Are they going to press any charges or anything? They don't. We're out of the conference center. They leave us alone. And that was that. That was the end of our time at the climate conference. So we burnt our passports. He was nearly arrested 3 times. We did some excellent actions with regards to trying to get back into the conference center, raising awareness in front of the whole world's media, burning our passport. It made the front page of the Times of India, I believe. We were on BBC, CBC. We were in the local paper here in Edmonton. Made a bit of a splash. And then we find ourselves, now we're in The Hague. We've got no passports. We didn't really think that through that well. And what are we going to do? Well, the first order of business for me was to produce this video of the events that had taken place. So we sent a bunch of tapes back to Toronto. Our old editor friend Jonathan Culp, he cut some stuff together for us and soon sends us a video that we can then share around and try and make available. Unfortunately, at the time, live video was just starting to become a possibility on the internet, as well as canned video. But unfortunately, it wasn't super popular yet. Watching video on internet, YouTube hadn't yet been invented. It wasn't yet something that could really go widespread. But regardless, we got the video produced. We're still doing our stuff. Now it's like, what are we going to do now? Tooker connects with some squatter activists. So squatting in the Netherlands is a huge thing. People just breaking into buildings and taking them over and living in them communal style and creating their own little community in each particular squat. So we connect with one squat. It was one of the oldest squats. It's like downtown The Hague or someplace in The Hague. Fortified. There's like one entrance in on the corner and another entrance in off the back, and there's a big courtyard. So it's basically like an entire corner block, several story fortified building that had been taken over for years and decades. We end up getting in there. They allow us to stay for a while. Ends up not working out. We connect with a fellow Greenpeace activist in Amsterdam who was away. They worked on the ships. This person was away. They let us stay at their apartment, which was nice. And that whole adventure, taking the train from The Hague to Amsterdam with all of the stuff that Tooker had accumulated in the few weeks that we've been in Holland, and then making our way to this apartment building, not getting there until the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody there to let us in. We have to sleep in the front entranceway of this apartment building, and we're getting kind of the boot and the broom in our back 6 o'clock in the morning by the maintenance guy telling us we're not supposed to be there. But we were, and we stayed, and now we had a place to stay, but we needed a purpose. And Tooker also ends up organizing a purpose for us with regards to our next level of activism, which is going to be at the NATO Air Force Base in Holland at, I can't remember, it's near the town of Oss, O-S-S, but I can't remember the exact name of the Air Force Base. And there was a film that we produced out of that called the Christmas Peace Action Camp. I haven't been able to locate it, so I'm sorry I won't be able to link it for you. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about that action camp and getting to that action camp, which was quite exciting. So we show up. It's right around Christmas time. We're lonely. I'm lonely for I'm homesick for my family, not often away at Christmas time. Tooker's lonely for his wife, Ange, and it's Christmas. We want to connect. We want to be with like-minded people. So Tooker comes in contact with these peace activists, and they've been involved with protesting the NATO Air Force Base for years and years and years. And they would often break onto the base. They would symbolically go up and smash the warplanes with hammers. They would try and expose the fact that nuclear weapons were being stored at that base, which was not allowed according to Dutch law, I don't think. But it was being done anyways. So we connect with these activists, and we were going to go out and join their Christmas Peace Action Camp. And it's like Christmas Eve, and we catch a train, and it's late. We catch a train out to the town, I think it's the town of Oss, and there's no buses. We got to make it out to the countryside where this Air Force base is and try and find this little camp. There's no buses or anything. So we take a taxi, and Tooker's got some rudimentary directions, and we find ourselves, it's dark. We're on this tiny little dirt road in the countryside with forests on both sides, no lights, no signs of civilization anywhere. And Tooker says, "Yeah, I think we're close. We'll just, we'll just jump out here." So we jump out of the cab. Like I said, it's nighttime. It's snowing. It's dark. We're like, what? So I'm like, okay, I'll follow Tooker. It's a good adventure. So we're walking down this little dirt road, and we eventually see a campfire through the trees off in the distance. And we trudge through the bush, and sure enough, there's the Peace Action Camp. We see some banners hanging. There's a little fire going. Nobody's there, though, which was a little bit odd. So we sit down, warm ourselves by the fire. It doesn't take long for folks to show up, and they're at first a little bit startled. Who are you? And we explain, and they're like, "Oh, Tooker, yes, Kelly, hi, welcome to our camp." And it was all very lovely. They set us up in a lean-to with some boughs for bedding, and it's an open little lean-to, and there's three of us, and we were all kind of scraggly and growing our beards, and we were like the three bearded men on Christmas Eve who had come to this out-of-towners who had showed up. It was kind of funny. The next day, we have a little action at the front gates of the Air Force Base, and we had some tea, and there were some banners, and we try and stand in front of the traffic coming in and out of the gates, and a little bit of skirmishes here and there, nothing too serious. That was a prelude to the next day's actions on Boxing Day, where a bunch of us showed up in 2 or 3, maybe 4 vehicles. We show up to the side of the NATO Air Force Base, scurry down through a ditch. There's a large, probably a 10-foot tall chain link fence. Somebody's got some snippers, and they make a nice zipper cut in this chain link fence and open it up. There was a symbolic door frame that was put on this zipper opening in the fence that said atom bombs or atom bomb base. Now again, this base, they were saying that they weren't holding any nuclear weapons at that base. It was against the law in the Netherlands to have nuclear weapons on that country's soil. But the activists were quite convinced that, in fact, there were nuclear weapons at that base. So the purpose of this action was to get on the base and get to the proper designated building where they could literally get the intel, snatch the evidence that they needed to then show the country and show the world that, look, these people, against the law and against the wishes of the people, are housing these nuclear weapons on Dutch soil, with the intent of that would end. They would stop doing that. So we've got the fence open. People start running down the runway towards the building. Tooker takes off like a bat out of hell, doesn't even say anything, and we didn't really plan out what was going to happen, assuming that I was just going to follow him, I suppose. But I kind of thought, well, if I follow him as he's running to this building, they're definitely going to get arrested. I'm going to get pinched. We're not going to get this footage out to the world. And I could see soldiers, they're coming in from this side. They're all dressed in black balaclavas, automatic weapons. So I made the decision that, you know what, I'm out of there. Right, I got the footage. I beat it back through the fence, up through the ditch, jump into one of the waiting cars. There was a young guy. It was his first time ever on an action, this young 18-year-old kid. I'm like, punch it, man, punch it. We got to get out of here. And there's other people trying to escape who weren't looking to get arrested, but the soldiers had come through the fence and down into the ditch, and they were grabbing other activists. And we were lucky to be the only two to escape. Actually, three that got away on that day. And thankfully, we were able to get away and get to a local cable television studio that we just sort of rolled up on with one of the local guys and knocked on the door late at night. And in Dutch, he explained to the young guy that was working there that we were a part of this action, and we got this really cool video footage of said action breaking into the NATO Air Force Base, and we would love it if we could please use the equipment at the community cable television station to edit together a quick little video about this. Young guy was super accommodating, brought us in and sat there, and he actually was the main editor. He was the engineer on the whole project for several hours that it took to cut it all together. And then we had this video that we could share to the world of the Christmas Peace Action Camp. So of all the activists that went there that day to expose the nuclear weapons on that NATO base, 10 were arrested. I got away, the young guy got away, and another gentleman got away who... It was good because later on, the next day when we were back at the camp, which was really right beside, on the next property beside the NATO Air Force Base, we're at the camp, and some local police had come to the camp and started asking, there's the three of us sitting at the camp around the fire, who are you, what's going on? But as they were approaching, the older activist campaigner, he told me to shut up, don't say a single word, don't do anything, he'll do all the talking. So they were asking, who am I? They want to see some ID. And the other campaigner in Dutch, he's explaining to them that no, we'd have no right, there's no right to ask for ID. We don't have to show our ID. We're not doing anything wrong. Then they wanted to give us a ticket for an illegal campfire in the forest, which justified him getting my ID. And the Dutch campaigner was able to talk him out of that harebrained idea. And they eventually left. So Tooker's in jail. That other Scottish bearded guy that had come down, he's in jail. 8 other activists are in jail being held. They split them up into 4 different locations around the countryside. Thankfully, Tooker's jailing was in the town closest to where we were, so we were able to go visit him. And then again on New Year's Eve, we were able to go back and visit him and have a nice long visit. We'd worked it out with the police there. It was basically a holding cell at the local police station. So we were allowed to have a nice little visit, and we brought in a little bit of wine for New Year's, and I had my camera with me, and we had a good little visit. And then at the end, I wanted to take some video inside, but they weren't going to let me. But I reached into my bag and I turned on the camera. I said, I'm just going to take a quick shot, and it's already running. And as the guard said, no, you're not allowed to shoot in here, I pulled it out, and Tooker starts going on his monologue. He can pick up a cue like nobody's business, and telling about being arrested and being in this little cell over Christmas time, and there's supposed to be a time for peace on Earth, but the Dutch are hosting American-made nuclear weapons on their soil. So he's making a campaign pitch. I get the shot of him in his cell, and we very quickly get escorted out of the jail. A few days later, Tooker ends up being deported back to Canada, and I'm left in the Netherlands on my own. I got his camera, which is nice. I still got a means to do my video activism. And I've got a place to stay temporarily at the Greenpeace campaigners' apartment in Amsterdam. I got no money and no idea what's going to happen. And of course, I got no passport, so traveling around is going to be a difficult problem. What is this now? This is, oh my gosh. So here I'm hoping that episode 5 I'm going to get into 2001, and I look at my timer and I'm over a half an hour, I'm approaching the half an hour mark. I haven't even got out of 2000, or I just got out of 2000. So we're January 2001. Now I got to back up a little bit to the mayor campaign, because I'd met a woman during the mayoral campaign. We became fairly close, and during our time in Holland, during Tooker and mine's time in Holland, my relationship, I was keeping it alive with Bridget. And as Tooker was being deported back to Canada in the early January, Bridget was making plans to come over to Amsterdam and spend some time, hanging out, visiting. I was going to be her own personal tutor and trainer in video production. She had an idea for a video project, and she had somebody set up for an interview in Scotland, I believe. So it was going to be nice. We were going to have a nice visit. We were going to carry on with our video activism, etc., etc. Bridget comes over. We're staying at this friend's place in Amsterdam. I guess we didn't tell her that, Tooker was gone, and I brought this other friend in to stay with me instead. She didn't like that arrangement, so basically kicked us out of her apartment in Amsterdam. And now we're off. I think we had to go back to The Hague. We had some other friends that we'd made in The Hague, and we're now back into another squat in The Hague, which was in the old Ministry of Finance, an old government ministry building that was squatted, taken over, and we were able to stay there with a bunch of other squatters and basically sublet one of the rooms. There was still rent to be paid because there were still bills to be paid, but it wasn't very much, and it was a very cool building to live in. At any rate, I wanted to pick up where Tooker had left off doing the live internet show, and came up with an idea to create a type of variety show. So imagine your late night TV show. You've got music, you've got special guests, you've got interviews that come in, a couple of different comedy segments, what have you, maybe the news or the weather or whatever. So we scripted this show. We got some special guests to come down and talk about campaigning against nuclear weapons and climate change. We had some guests that come in to make a meal. They were called the Vegan Cannibals, a bunch of dumpster diving anarchists from outside of town. They'd brought up a whole bunch of food, and upstairs to the room that we were making this live internet television show, they were cooking up this food in their hoodies, looking all sus. It was pretty funny. And we had a camera up there and running coax cable from that camera down the side of the building outside into downstairs, and we're mixing it all live and sending it out on the internet live. Or so we thought we were getting it out onto the internet live. The problem was we were using a laptop of dubious origin. I'm not going to say exactly where that laptop was coming from, but it probably wasn't the one we should have been using. At any rate, we had live cooking going on upstairs. We had our guests. We had a DJ. We had music. We had a live studio audience. It was quite fun, and we had our guests. So it was great. I wish for the life of me I could remember what we called this live internet show. It was quite a lot of fun to put on. And we thought we were going to keep going with this format and keep putting on these shows, but we didn't. Regardless, when you're trying to do stuff, when you're trying to do something from nothing, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. This was a success and a failure because we didn't get out on the internet, nor did we, I think, actually record the event itself. So it ended up just being a live event. However, the participants really loved it, and it was a great learning experience. So we did climate activism, we did anti-nuclear activism, we did some squatting activism, and now we're doing some independent media activism. And this is all in the space of a month. It's late winter, getting into spring in the Netherlands. Bridget ends up going back to Canada. We produced that video with her about climate change and water as a greenhouse gas. That was the theme of that film. So she ended up shooting that, and I helped her cut it all together. And then she went back. I was alone. I ended up doing one more a gig, I think with the Friends of the Earth. They were involved with an action that was putting up a tripod blockade on the runway of a airport expansion, I think at Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. So they were protesting that, and they'd contracted me to come out and be their videographer for the day, which was good because then I was able to use that money that I'd earned on that one day's work to eventually pay for my way to get out of the country and back to Canada in the spring of 2001. I hope I can get there before the end of this program. So it wasn't easy. Obviously, I've got no passport still. We did end up getting, however, we applied for world citizen passports. So this is a passport that was set up by an American expat in World War II who had denounced his American citizenship with regards to protesting the Second World War. So this organization was set up, World Citizen Passports, and people were able to get these passports and use them, especially undocumented people. They were able to use these to get safe passage to a handful of countries in the world, most of which, with apologies to them, not many people are going to want to go to these countries. So we get these passports, the World Citizen Passports. We ended up getting some sort of faux Greenpeace passports as well, just for fun. But we had these World Citizen Passports. Obviously, we got these before Tooker had been grabbed and deported. I needed to get from the Netherlands back to Germany, Frankfurt, where our return flight was booked to go back to Canada. And we'd had to change the tickets and extend, obviously, that stay. On the train to Germany, I get stopped by guards on the train, and they ask for my passport, my train ticket, and I give them my World Citizen passport, and they're looking at it, and they're confused, and I was explaining to them, World Citizen passport, it's fine, and this is me, and the name matches, and, I got my ticket, and they eventually were like, yeah, okay, that's fine, and they let me go, and I was feeling pretty good about that. Get to the airport at Frankfurt, and presented them with my ticket and my World Citizen passport, and the person at the counter looking at the passport, and and I'm explaining to them, World Citizen passport, and it's based on the UN Charter of Human Rights, I believe, that guaranteed each person's safe passage back to their own country. So I'm saying, like, this is a legitimate document. It's based on legitimate law. I've got a right to go back to Canada. I've got my ticket. This is me. It all checks out. Please let me go. So they brought a manager over, went through this whole spiel again. He eventually gives me my boarding pass. So I'm like, wow, this is excellent. Walking over. Oh, sorry, one more security check before we can get into the departures area. My whole spiel about these World Citizen passports did not go over at all with the young German guard or police or whatever they were. Anyways, I was asked to come with them. They took me into a small office in the airport, started asking me questions, what's happening, where's your passport, what is this going on? I said, you know what, my passport, it was destroyed. That's a legitimate document, I've got a right to go back to Canada. They said, well, what happened to your passport? I said, well, it was destroyed. Well, how was it destroyed? I said, it was in a fire. Well, what kind of a fire? I said, well, it was a small fire. Actually, no, that's what I told the embassy when the Germans, they called the Canadians. And so we got this young Canadian, what do you want us to do? I get on the phone with them. I'm explaining myself. They asked what kind of fire. I said, it was a small fire. They said, well, you know what? You're going to have to come to Berlin and get a temporary passport before you're allowed to leave the country and go back to Canada. Otherwise, you're going to be, they're going to keep you detained. So the Germans, they give me a temporary document that says I can stay in the country and I'm free to travel around for 72 hours, I think they gave me. And I had to burn off to Berlin. Now, I only had enough money to get back to Canada. I didn't have money to get from Frankfurt to Berlin and back and, spend a couple days in hostels or whatever. So I get on the phone. I call Bridget, my new friend, and she ends up having to call one of her friends, scramble together a couple of $100 so I can able to catch a train to Berlin and back and survive for a couple of days. Get to Berlin, stay in a hostel, get to the Canadian Embassy the following day. Again, I have to explain myself. They asked me to put it in writing. So I actually put the whole thing in writing. It was a political protest and blah, blah, blah. And, we burnt our passports and yada, yada, yada. Nobody said anything. They just gave me my 72-hour... no, not my 72-hour temporary. They gave me my temporary Canadian passport travel document. And I was free to go back to Frankfurt to then leave back to Canada. Now, I was running real low on money, but I did have a bunch of those postcards that I was still making for my 4x6 prints, sticking them onto cardboard, which was easy to find. So I'm out on the streets of Berlin trying my very rudimentary, poor German, approaching people, trying to sell some of these postcards and get some cash. I was able to, bring in some dollars, so Deutschmarks, I guess it would have been, and all was fine and well. Make it back to Frankfurt, and I was given a tip that I could stay at every airport and at every train station in Europe. There's a social services, sometimes by the Catholic Church, but anyways, you can reach out to these people for help. So I found the pastor, the Catholic priest, that had a small office in the Frankfurt airport, explained to my situation. My flight was the following day. I had no place to stay, if they could help me out or whatever. So he said, okay, here's my card. You can stay in the church. You can stay in our chapel here in the airport, sleep under the pews or whatever. And when security comes, because they will come, when security comes, just show them my card and tell them that Father so-and-so said it was okay that you could stay here. So I thought, well, that's really nice. That's really great. I slept the night. Did get interrupted by the security. Showed the card. It was no problem. Soon I'm back on my way to Philadelphia, where there's a quick layover, and back to Toronto. So this is early April of 2001. After a whirlwind, we're going on almost 18 months of nonstop direct action. Get back to Toronto, and it turns out that I catch a very bad flu, some kind of crazy virus, and ended up passing it on to Bridget. She was sick for a super long time, but we were able to recover in time to attend the proceedings in Quebec City in April 21st, 2001, when the Free Trade of the Americas Agreement was being negotiated, and you had countries from all over North and South America show up in Quebec City, and you had 80,000 civil society people, union activists and other activists, environmentalists like myself, independent media folks, concerned citizens from all up and down the Americas that had come to protest. The police they'd fortified the zone in Old Town Quebec City. Big high fences and armed police in riot gear, and it was crazy. So I want to tell you about that story in episode 6, the Free Trade of the Americas Agreement, and all the crazy activism that went down, and the chemical poisonings, and the snatch squads on the street by Canadian Special Forces, and the trebuchet, or the catapult of teddy bears that was unleashed upon security forces, which was quite funny, and in turn the 5,000 chemical bombs that were unleashed on the citizens of Quebec City and the citizens that had traveled from far and wide to protest the FTAA. So that's it for episode 5, Confessions of a Gen Xtivist, True Crime Stories. Thank you for tuning in. Max, I hope you're enjoying this series, enjoying these stories from your dad, and hope to see you and hope for you to be listening on the following episode 6, coming up soon. Adieu.